My name is Ellie, and I've always been the kind of person who thrives on independence. After college, I moved to a small city 2 hours from my hometown, chasing a fresh start with a job at a local bookstore. I rented a cozy apartment on the third floor of an old brick building. Nothing fancy, just a one-bedroom with creaky floors and a view of the quiet street below. It wasn't much, but it was mine, and I loved the freedom it gave me. The neighborhood was sleepy, with a corner cafe, a grocery store, and a little park where I'd jog on weekends. I didn't know many people, but that suited me fine. I had my routine: work, books, and the occasional coffee date with my best friend Sarah, who lived a few blocks away. Life was predictable until it wasn't. It started on a chilly Thursday evening in late October. I was sprawled on my couch, a glass of cheap red wine in hand, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple. The street below glowed under the fading light, casting long shadows from the trees lining the sidewalk. That's when I first saw him, a man standing across the street, leaning against a lamppost. He wore a black hoodie, the hood pulled up tight, hiding his face in shadow. His hands were stuffed in his pockets, and he didn't move. He just stood there, head tilted up, staring straight at my window. At first, I brushed it off. Maybe he was waiting for a friend or admiring the sunset like I was. But something about him gnawed at me. He was too still, too focused. My stomach twisted, a faint unease curling inside me. I set my glass down and leaned closer to the window, squinting to make out his face, but the hood swallowed any details. After a minute, I forced myself to look away, telling myself I was overreacting. When I glanced back an hour later, he was gone, and I let out a shaky breath, convincing myself it was nothing. The next morning, though, he was back. I was getting ready for work, pulling on my coat, when I peeked out the window, and there he was again. Same spot, same hoodie, same unyielding stare. My heart thudded hard against my ribs, a cold sweat prickling my skin. This wasn't a coincidence. He was watching me. My hands trembled as I grabbed my phone and snapped a blurry photo through the glass. I sent it to Sarah with a frantic text. "This guy's been outside my place 2 days in a row, staring up at me, freaking out here." Her reply came fast. "That's creepy as hell, Ellie. Maybe he's just a weirdo, but keep an eye on him. Call me if it gets worse." I decided to leave early, hoping to catch him off guard. I grabbed my bag, locked the door behind me, and hurried down the stairs, my boots clattering on the worn steps. When I stepped outside, I scanned the street. He was gone. Relief washed over me, but it didn't last. The whole walk to work, I kept glancing over my shoulder, half expecting to see that black hoodie trailing behind me. That night, I got home late. the bookstore's evening shift, dragging longer than usual. I climbed the stairs, my keys jingling in my hand, and as I reached my floor, I froze. There, tucked under my door, was a folded piece of paper. My throat tightened as I bent down to pick it up. It was a plain scrap, torn from a notebook, with jagged handwriting scrawled in black ink. I see you. My knees went weak, and I dropped the note like it burned me. I fumbled with my keys, hands shaking so bad I could barely get the door open, and slammed it shut behind me, locking it twice. I called Sarah, my voice trembling as I told her about the note. "That's not normal, Ellie," she said, her tone sharp with worry. "You need to call the cops. Now." I nodded, even though she couldn't see me, and dialed the non-emergency line. The officer on the phone was calm, almost dismissive. "We'll send someone to check the area," he said, "but unless he's done something concrete, there's not much we can do." They sent a patrol car, and I watched from my window as it rolled by, its lights flashing briefly. The man wasn't there, and the officers didn't find anything. I went to bed clutching a kitchen knife, the note crumpled on my nightstand like a silent threat. The next few days were quiet, and I dared to hope it was over. Maybe he'd gotten bored, or the police had scared him off. But on Monday, as I left for work, I saw him again, this time sitting on a bench across the street, his hood still up, his gaze locked on me. My stomach lurched, and I hurried to my car, locking the doors the second I was inside. At work, I couldn't focus, my mind replaying that stare over and over. My coworker, Mark, noticed my jittery hands and pale face. "You okay, Ellie?" he asked, his brow furrowing. "No," I admitted, my voice barely a whisper. I told him about the man, the note, everything. Mark's jaw tightened, and he offered to walk me home after our shift. I accepted, grateful for the company, but even with him beside me, I felt exposed, like eyes were boring into my back. That night, I decided to get groceries to distract myself. The store was nearly empty, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead as I tossed pasta and canned soup into my cart. Then I felt it, that prickling sensation on my neck. I turned, and there he was, standing at the end of the aisle, his hoodie blending into the shadows. He didn't move, just stared, his hands deep in his pockets. My cart clattered as I abandoned it, my pulse hammering in my ears. I bolted to the checkout, paid with shaking hands, and ran to my car, glancing back to see him stepping out of the store, watching me drive away. When I got home, I barricaded myself inside, dragging a chair under the doorknob for extra security. I called the police again, my voice cracking as I explained the grocery store encounter. They promised more patrols, but their tone said they didn't take it seriously. I barely slept, every creak of the building jolting me awake, my mind conjuring images of that hooded figure lurking just outside. The next morning, another note waited under my door. You can't hide. My breath hitched, and I sank to the floor, clutching the paper, tears stinging my eyes. This wasn't random anymore. It was personal. I called Sarah, and she came over immediately, her face pale as she read the note. You're not staying here alone, she insisted, dragging me to her place for the night. I didn't argue. At Sarah's, I felt safer, but not by much. Her apartment was on the ground floor, and every shadow outside her window made me jump. Around midnight, her phone buzzed, a blocked number. She answered, then handed it to me, her eyes wide. It's for you. My blood ran cold as I took the phone, pressing it to my ear. Silence at first, then a low, raspy breath, followed by a whisper. I know where you are, Ellie. The line went dead, and I dropped the phone, my hands trembling uncontrollably. Sarah called the police, her voice rising with panic as she explained the call. This time, they took it more seriously, sending an officer to her place. He was a gruff man named Officer Daniels, with tired eyes and a notepad. We'll trace the call, he said, but it's probably a burner. You should install cameras at your place. I nodded, numb, as Sarah squeezed my hand. Back at my apartment the next day, I ordered a cheap security camera online, paying extra for overnight shipping. That night, I stayed up, too wired to sleep, when a loud thunk echoed from my door. My heart stopped. I crept to the peephole, peering out, and saw him. The man in the hoodie stood there, his face hidden, a thin metal tool glinting in his hand as he scratched at my lock. I stumbled back, stifling a scream, and dialed 911. He's trying to break in, I whispered, my voice breaking. The dispatcher kept me on the line, promising help was coming, but every second felt like an eternity as the scratching grew louder. Suddenly, it stopped. I heard footsteps retreating down the hall, fast and heavy. When the police arrived, they found fresh scratches on my lock and a broken screwdriver abandoned on the stairs. He's escalating, Officer Daniels said, his face grim. We'll set up a sting. Stay somewhere else tonight. I crashed at Sarah's again, but sleep wouldn't come. My mind raced. What did he want? Why me? The next day, the camera arrived, and Mark helped me install it. His usual easygoing demeanor replaced by quiet determination. If he comes back, we'll catch him, he said, testing the feed on my phone. I nodded, clinging to that small hope. 2 nights later, my phone buzzed with a notification from the camera. I opened the app, and my stomach dropped. There he was, standing at my door, his hoodie dark against the hallway light. He didn't touch the lock this time. He just stood there, staring into the camera, then slipped something under the door and left. The police were already on their way, alerted by the live feed. I watched as they arrived, two officers sprinting up the stairs, but he was gone again. They found another note. "You're mine." That was the breaking point. Officer Daniels called me the next morning. "We've got a plan," he said. "We'll stake out your place tonight. Stay with your friend and don't come back until we say." I agreed, my nerves shredded, and spent the day at Sarah's, jumping at every sound. Late that night, Daniels called again. "We got him," he said, his voice tight with triumph. "Caught him red-handed, trying to jimmy your lock. He's in custody." Relief flooded me, but it was tinged with dread as he continued. "His name's David Kessler. He's got a rap sheet. Stalking, harassment. Just got out of prison 6 months ago. Lived 2 floors above you." The revelation hit me like a punch. David Kessler, my upstairs neighbor. I'd seen him in passing, a quiet guy with a scruffy beard, always wearing that damn hoodie. He'd been right there, watching me all this time. My skin crawled as I remembered the notes, the calls, the way he'd stood so close, yet so invisible. They charged him with stalking, attempted breaking and entering, and violating parole. He's behind bars now, but the damage lingers. I moved out of that apartment a month later, unable to shake the feeling of being watched. Even now, living in a new place with triple locks and a security system, I flinch at the sight of a black hoodie. Sarah teases me about it, but she doesn't know the half of it. The way my heart races at night. The way I still check my cameras obsessively. David Kessler took something from me. My sense of safety. My peace of mind. But I survived him. And every time I lock my door, I remind myself I'm stronger than the shadows he left behind.